we see these, I don't watch the Ammon shows, but I imagine, TV shows, and they dramatise it really well to make it look like every job's something significant and every moment is life-threatening and all these sorts of things. But, that ain't the way that your normal day goes. And, you don't just save a life by being a proceduralist, having a drug that you give, or, a piece of equipment that saves a life. Sometimes you save a life by, being present to someone, hearing their story, being kind to them, and getting them to the right resources and support networks if you can. That's still saving a life.
Yep. Well, Ricky Smyth, thanks so much for your time today. I'm so excited to have you in today. Thank you.
Pleasure. No, it's nice to be here, Ben.
What we like to do with Changing Lives podcast is we're really trying to give people that are starting out on their path to a career in paramedics or in the emergency services, that real insight, the real world insight from real world people. And yourself is probably about the best candidate I could think of.
Thank you.
Mate,
that's very kind.
You've been over 30 years in the service as a paramedic. And you're now over 20 years as a critical care paramedic. I want to unwrap that, learn about that role.
Sure.
And also your journey into that role as well, because that started, as I understand, from 15 years of age going into the Royal Australian Navy.
Yes, it did. That's right.
So I want to hear about that journey, mate. But you've had quite a varied career. You've been a single responder paramedic, interesting role, various station officer in charge roles, again, medic in the Royal Australian Navy.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're a university lecturer and sessional tutor as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I've done some of that too, a bit of everything. Yeah.
Mate, we sent out a form for you to fill out and before we have guests on the show. And after reading your responses, I was inspired, mate. I was really inspired.
You're very kind, Ben. Thank you.
Some of your accomplishments that you listed personally, there's probably many more, but you're a humble man, include being the Queensland Paramedic of the Year in 2001. That was like yesterday, right?
Yeah, 9/11.
Oh, wow.
It was the day after that, yeah.
Wow. Being a peer support officer for 20 years, which is, as I would understand it, to be a pretty important role.
No, it's a great role.
Yeah, so I want to unpack that and talk about that and what that entails. Some of your accomplishments too are sort of off-duty ones, like a successful off-duty breach delivery, the resuscitation of your neighbour's twins with your wife.
Yes.
And speaking of your wife,
yes,
another great accomplishment, in fact, probably up there, is 38 years of marriage.
That's right.
Raising a family, despite your career in emergency services, shift work, all of that stuff, and at the Royal Australian Navy as well, out of the home. I don't know how you do it, but I'd love to maybe get some tips also for those
Give
listening.
it a crack. Yeah.
Mate, so where did it all start for you?
Grew up in Melbourne, Ben, and a friend came to me in year 10 and said that they were joining the Navy. And I said, cracking idea. I wasn't really enjoying school that much, not very academic. And so I ended up going along and doing the recruitment process. He didn't. He chose not to after recruiting me himself, and entered the Navy at 15.
Wow.
And first time away over to WA as part of their junior recruit sort of program, which was kind of like another 9 months of schooling. But you had to sort of choose some path in the Navy that you might want to choose, yeah? And for some great reason, I chose, the medical branch to go into rather than gunnery, because I guess it spoke to me that after I was finished in the Navy, it'd be something that I could explore afterwards. Came from a very caring, generous family who put other people's needs first. So the medical role fit quite well for me. So way back in 1979 as a 15-year-old.
Wow, we could do the calculations now.
So it was great. It was a really good time. Navy was wonderful. It was all peacetime service. And so, medical sailors were basically looking after a crew of around about, depending on what ship, 200 to 300 people. And there was yourself and an offsider that was basically looking after their care. Being peacetime, most of the stuff you cared about or looked after was fights, sporting injuries, and sexually transmitted diseases from people coming from overseas.
Right.
So, there was not a lot of acuity. And having said that too, Ben, armed forces are those places that if you are, suffering any sort of chronic disease issue or medical problem, you tend not to be able to get through that last selection process. So we weren't dealing with things that we would normally see with ambulance, which is asthma, diabetes, heart disease, blood pressure, those sorts of things. So you're dealing with fit, healthy people that probably drink a little bit too much and play up a little bit too much. Yeah.
What was it like starting out in that career? You said there wasn't this, initially this huge motivation that I want to be working in the emergency services, but it seemed like the right channel to take.
Yes.
And then there was obviously something that really grabbed you about this sort of work.
Yeah, I think the ability to help people, and even though you're dealing with fit, healthy people, probably a little bit about, the fly in, fly out minor stuff, which is where, you're generally dealing with healthy people, but being away from home is a challenge. Not necessarily physically, because all your needs are met physically, but emotionally and psychologically and to some degree spiritually. So people are leaving their children and families and wives for extended periods of time. And so, you're part medic, you're part counsellor, you're part, peer supporter, you're part lifeline, a whole range of things. And as I sort of alluded to, on a ship of 300, there's only 2 medical people. And so you tend to become quite well known and popular early in the piece, as opposed to maybe, 100 engineers that might be on the ship or those sorts of things. There's more anonymity with that sort of role. So, you're front and centre.
Yeah. And that really gave you, you really felt inspired. And where did it go after that? Because you obviously came out of there and then decided to head towards a career in the service. What happened after that?
Yeah, I think I throw my friend under the bus saying that he sort of recruited me for the Navy and didn't join up himself. I think I'd always been attracted to some sort of uniform work, whether that would be Defence Force or police or ambulance or something along those sorts of lines. So it's not uncommon that I've fallen into that role for a period. And it's been a great journey of opportunities and 90-degree turns at different points, I suppose. But the whole way through, regardless of what I've done, I've always been keen to be of use, to be helpful, to be generous and do my best to make the world a bit of a better place. So that's carried through no matter what role we've done, Yeah.
Yeah. I alluded to some of what you've done in your career just at the start, but before we get into the critical care paramedic role and what that entails, can you just give us a brief summary of where it's, from where we've started to now as your critical care paramedic?
So before I came to Queensland, which is where my mum had moved to from Melbourne, whilst during my 10-year career with the Navy, I tried to sort of join the Victorian Ambulance because we had some family connections who'd been there. Tried to also join police. Both were a negative because I'm only 170 centimetres tall. And back in the day, I think 170 was the bare minimum. So I got a note of those sorts of things. Came up to Queensland post-Navy, so discharged from Navy. Did concreting, so labouring for about 6 months or so. Loved it. Loved the idea of seeing what you've done that day. However, the downside of it was there aren't a lot of older concreters, and so I knew that as much as I loved seeing a house pad or a footpath or a driveway, it's not something that was going to be a career for me. And I approached in the day, it was the Queensland Ambulance Transport Brigade, ran a program called the Honorary System, where you could put your credentials forward and then volunteer to come along as a sort of like a third person on a truck, and see what the ambulance service was about. Right. So it's a very loose opportunity that was there, and I come in, once a fortnight or once a month to do a shift. And the beauty of it was the two things was that, number one, it gave me a chance to sort of see what the job was and to see whether it fitted with what I could do or thought I could do. Number two was they got to see me as well and decide whether it was someone they might want to employ or not want to employ. So there were some benefits there, but I think because the program was quite loose in the way that they ran it, there were some people there who'd been doing the honorary position for a couple of years and never achieved a job.
Okay.
So I think it was only like about 3 months after doing that program that I got a position, which was amazing. Yeah. And frightening.
Yeah.
So I turned up, took my earring out of my ear, my bling earring after coming out of the Navy and being a rebel, concerned that the boss wouldn't like it. And the chap that came out that was in charge of QATB Southport had a big bling earring himself. And it was good. So it was a good introduction.
So you went on home and put the earring back in?
Yeah, put it back in. It was all okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you've made your way through the service right up to, being in that critical care role. How did that all take place?
Yeah, it's look, sometimes I think, Ben, you arrive at the right time, even if you're not sure it is the right time. So the opportunity to join the QATB was amazing. Back then, they were sort of like a single response car mostly, and so there weren't always two people on the car. And to become an ambulance officer, you needed an advanced first aid certificate, be of reasonable character, and be able to drive a car. So the employment status was was a lot less than it is now. And a lot of the characters that came to ambulance back then were tradespeople. So you had a lot of electricians, plumbers, carpenters that realised that their physical attributes were on the decline, or they saw the opportunity to become an ambulance officer and took it. So it's quite rudimentary. Back in, 1988, 89, you need to understand that the places like New South Wales Ambulance and the Victorian Ambulance or Metropolitan Ambulance Service, they've been running critical care programs for like 20 or 30 years.
Right.
So Queensland wasn't seen to be the height of ambulance services around Australia. So initially we had maybe 3 or 4 drugs. There was no pass-fail for attendance at courses and those sorts of things.
Wow.
You bought your own fishing tackle box to stock with stock, and is very much a learn by experience. Routine, no mentoring, no real supervision, stuff like that.
Wow!
So it was learning on the job. Yeah, if you can't handle a fire, you're out.
Yeah.
So, but thankfully, sink or swim. I kept on swimming, so that was good. The service, so the QAT Southport were their own independent employer, so they were like 79, 89 different employers within Queensland, all under the umbrella of the QATB, which was the central hiring sort of place. Okay. But the local boss could hire whoever he wanted, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. And so they decided to make it a one-service process that happened with a change of government. So it changed from being the Joe Bjelke-Petersen Liberal or National Party routine to being Labor and a one service routine. At which point funding was achieved.
When was this around?
It would have been around 1990, 91.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot changed in that time. A lot of people were worried. A lot of people were fearful, but the transition was fine. So. Then they would have gone down the concept of having a diploma of pre-hospital care, which people signed up to. Some were fearful, some were keen, some were ready to go. So it was an amazing transition. So it's great to see the service change to where we are today, because I like to believe that, we would be one of the leaders. It's not a competition. Everyone's trying to, provide the best care possible. But there's certainly lots of things that we do well and are seen a lot better than we would have been back in 89, 88. Yeah. Fantastic.
So, wow. So, and it just strikes me now with you're operating as in that critical care role.
Yes.
And you said you weren't any good at school.
No, rubbish.
And how have you learnt and grown in your knowledge and skills over that time to operate now as you do?
Yeah, well, I think 15, I certainly wasn't academic, more sports related or focused. The continued education in the Navy, and then once I became a medic, I had the opportunity to specialise as well. So I became they call it an environmental medicine unit sailor. So he did occupational health and safety. And our boss, who was a doctor, we actually had two bosses that I experienced during that time. They were incredibly generous with the way that they would talk of the world and where we needed to, how we need to do our report writing and how we need to present ourselves. So I think it's been a constant, upgrading of skills and knowledge along the way, Ben. Look, I think for your students, the important thing is your desire to want to learn and be a lifelong learner. There's a chap at work whose son now flies, or was flying F-18s. He's now doing the jet strike fighter thing, But year 11 and 12, he had a terrible year. Left school with rubbish, OP or ATAR scores. Worked in Woolies for a while, and then decided, I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. And so went back to do some TAFE and schooling stuff and that. And here he is, a fighter pilot, and taking selfies of himself in the cockpit of an amazing military aircraft. And without that academic foundation. So, there are many pathways to get where you want to go. Yeah. It's just having the drive and endeavour and passion to keep at it, I think that's the important thing. So, yeah. Now, I look at the, people that come through their undergraduate degree now, or for instance, I have the opportunity of mentoring, graduates, CCP interns. They all come from a very academic background, and so they've done, their high school stuff. They've done the sciences. They've done their 3-year degree. They then do their masters, or advanced diploma. They're very clever. They're a lot more clever than I am at a cellular level and those sorts of things because they have the foundational work. I'm just lucky that I've been able to do this job for a long time and have a lot of experiential work, as well as having done a lot of reading and self-learning, and doing my own degree as well, to keep on learning, I suppose. So so I try and keep at the forefront of things.
Now I want to talk about the role in itself, just if you can detail, and it's important to note that as you currently work as a critical care paramedic in Queensland, you're not here representing any organisation. Representing yourself, your views are your own. Let's get that.
Let's get that elephant off the room. Yeah, that's right. They're my own views. That's right.
Yeah. So, what is the critical care paramedic role?
Well, it's morphed from back when it first kicked off, which is around about 1995-ish, when the program was totally new. You were everything. So. The advanced level paramedic, there was quite a large gap between the knowledge base of an intensive care paramedic and an advanced level paramedic. Yep. The skills were a lot more for an intensive care paramedic. And so you were busy for your 10 to 14 hour shift, providing a lot of the cares that the advanced care paramedic now does. So really where we've come in that 25-year period is that your advanced care paramedic now is basically the old school intensive care paramedic back from 1995, with just as many of the skills, knowledge, and drugs that we were carrying back in the day, with a couple of minor changes. So the roles evolved. And back in 95, you were kind of like a proceduralist. So you were basically driving from job to job to job, even just providing narcotic pain relief to patients,
Right.
which the advanced care paramedic didn't have. So it was a real experience to have been at the forefront of those sorts of moments, to now where a CCP is more seen as being a mentor, a clinical leader, a teacher. The role's really transformed a lot. So that's meant that some, intensive care or CCPs have to think about where their role lies, because they're not racing around anymore like they used to do. There's still a single officer response that's there, but there's some more specialisation that's going on with that role. So it's still an important role, just not as highfalutin as it was back in 95 when you were a proceduralist running around the place doing things. So so it's a great role. The other specialist role that people consider these days is a paramedic practitioner. And so that's not necessarily the high acuity stuff. It delves more into the chronic illness, chronic condition stuff, and gives you a whole different range of skills that are probably really applicable around the world. So, there's a couple of different pathways that people can choose these days. So,
right. So what does a typical day in the life of Ricky Smyth or a critical care paramedic look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, there still are the opportunities to work as a single officer on what they call a pod, like an intensive care or critical care pod. Their role will look totally different to mine. So, I've had the opportunity to work as a single officer, responder on a pod for around about 8 to 10 years or so.
Okay.
As I approach the last, chapter of my career, I'm really happy to be on a truck with a partner, mentoring students and being really busy. So there's two different types of things going on there. For the single officer on a pod, they'll effectively be, listening and looking out for jobs within the area or region to see whether they may be required, so that they can actually self-respond by contacting comms and say they've picked something up from the details that they've seen, or they will await to be summoned to go to the higher acuity sorts of jobs that may sound like they need a CCP.
Right.
Because we run with like an AMPDS two-tiered system that determines that if the questions are answered a certain way by the bystanders, it'll dictate what's required at the job and whether a CCP may be required. Yeah. The opposite of that is myself on a truck that goes to everything and anything. And so I'm in a position to be in that I'll go to potentially lots of non-acute or possibly low acuity jobs. But that could change with me being responded as a CCP to high acuity work. So what would the Dalai Lama say? The Dalai Lama would say that I'm just a monk. I'm just doing my thing, just being a humble sort of old servant, doing my bit. That's how I see myself now. Was just I really enjoy, tutoring, mentoring, sharing my knowledge, working with a partner, having a good laugh during the day, helping people. And going whichever way they want me to go. So, that's how it is for me towards the end of my career. Right. Still going to high acuity work here and there, but not necessarily on the platform that I'm the guy that you need to send. So, yeah.
Well, you've got the right haircut for it, mate.
I do.
Can you just detail some of those cases, some of those things that do fit into the high acuity work?
So high acuity work will generally be someone that sounds like they have significant mechanisms of injury that may require some support. Someone that is definitely behind the eight ball. So, for instance, cardiac arrests, very sick chest pains, very sick shortness of breath cases, those sorts of things. And we now have a thing called the High Acuity Response Unit, or HARU, which are CCPs that have had specialised training and support and high quality assurance that now essentially anaesthetise people. So they're bringing basically the hospital to the trauma patient with another set of skills as well. So you have your CCP, then you have your HARU people as well. So, coming back from, 88, 89 when I started, where you just, here's a set of keys and go out and do some stuff, to now where you get lots of support, mentoring around the place. It's a transformation that's quite crazy. Yeah. So, I could spend my day going from, falls in the home, nursing home type cases. A lot of our workload relates to, drugs, alcohol, mental health, and throw in some chronic health issues, your blood pressure issues, strokes, those sorts of things. To, for instance, going to traumatic cardiac arrest, cardiac arrests, acute pulmonary edema, so significant cardiac related shortness of breath. So, and of course all the COVID stuff. So it's an amazing job because of the diversity that you never know what you're up to on any given day. One of the best parts about being on a truck is just we get lots of students that come through the universities, and I love it. Like I love, they come to us with a lot of academic knowledge. Yep. They come to us with a lot of intelligence, but very little real world experience. And so, the saying goes that knowledge without experience is just information. So they come loaded full of questions and understanding pathophysiology. Yeah. But how do I get this person down from the third floor, or how do I get this person off the toilet, or how do I do X, Y, and Z? That's where the experiential, practical experience comes from, because it's an experiential job. Medicine's like that you may have your 7-year degree, but you've seen a lot of patients and you had a lot of chance to practice what you're doing. Yeah. So so it's good. Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff you can't actually learn in a textbook.
Definitely so. Oh, look, we could both go onto Google and all sorts of sites to be able to learn stuff, but it's actually that practical opportunity to be able to do that safely, where someone gives you enough rope to be able to not hang yourself but keep you safe and keep other people safe, which is the important part. So we create, or certainly I do, a really safe learning experience for people, because you learn best when you're safe, when you feel comfortable. And we make it fun and we make it enjoyable. And there are lots of challenges, and they're expected to raise their standard and their performance to a level that both my partner and I are happy with, because they're representing us, and that's why we set such a high standard. Yeah.
Just to finish off on the role now, do you have further scope, and are you just going to this situation because you know more or got more experience, but are you allowed to play with more things and deliver other drugs and things like that? How does it differ from some of the advanced care paramedic or?
Yeah, so a couple we would carry some advanced airway equipment. Okay. And skills and training that go with that. We also carry a number of different drugs that the advanced care paramedics don't carry. But really, we aren't as grandiose, compared to them as it used to be. And that's a good thing, because it means that the general public can get the best level of care from whoever attends the scene. Wow. I think the challenge now for people, Ben, is that so we used to say that it takes about 5 years to be able to see all the things that you may see as a paramedic, to be able to gain that experience and those sorts of things. I really feel for our graduates who come with 3 years of university study, a lot of information and knowledge, but maybe 18 weeks of practical experience, and they're expected to be a qualified paramedic. So it's not unusual for them to be really anxious about what they're doing on a daily basis, because they just simply haven't seen enough cases. Like under our old diploma system, when the QS became one and you did a 3-year diploma, you had a supervisor for 3 years.
Yeah.
You saw maybe 3,000 cases in that time. So you were pretty well experienced by the time you qualified. Now it may be at the most 18 weeks of clinical placement, which is maybe 300 to 500 patients. So it's really quite limited to what it used to be. And there's not really a lot of considerations to who's on that truck. It's as long as you're qualified, that's the scope of the system. So if you've just graduated and you're now qualified, I might have just graduated and been qualified, and so the both of us are working together on a truck with limited experience, as opposed to when a student comes onto our truck, for instance, at the moment at my station, there's 64 years of ambulance experience on the truck, because my partner and I have both done 32 years. Do you know what I mean? So there's not a lot that we haven't seen. There may be something that that we've not seen, but mostly we've been somewhere, done something, and touched something that we're all used to, and it's a solid foundation for students to be able to learn from. Yeah,
that's interesting. I mean, with the students that come through the Australian Paramedical College, I know that's one thing we're big on, giving them that early experience, even if it's just volunteering, St. John's or, event medic sort of work.
Yes.
But also, obviously, going through the diploma or the Cert 4, having the workshops, having to do placement, all that sort of stuff, before they potentially then get entry into university.
Yeah.
And a lot of people choose this option because they don't feel like they have the option of going into university, but it actually gives them somewhat of an advantage, we feel, to getting hands-on sooner and getting that experience sooner. Is there any other things that you'd recommend how students can actually get that experience?
Well, I guess like we were saying, Ben, we could both learn a lot from YouTube and Google and all those sorts of things, and a 3-year degree. Those are all kind of like the technical things that people can learn and master themselves, because it's the world of adult learning, right? But it's the non-technical things that actually make or attract a good paramedic or a good practitioner, and all those non-technical things are all communication, self-understanding, self-awareness, understanding that the world's a very complex place. And non-judgment is probably a very good strategy, because you don't know the path that someone else has been down. And so I frequently recommend, being involved in disability services, any sort of alcohol, drug, mental health facility, like Mirakai, those sorts of places that may be interested in having you volunteer, because I think it just makes you a better person, because you can relate to people. A lot of our students, and this is very much a generalisation, especially from university, come from a middle to high income background. So they've done okay in life. They come from loving families and those sorts of things, but because a lot of our work is mental health, drugs and alcohol, or domestic violence, all those sorts of tricky things. You don't have a lot of experience with those things if you come from a safe, loving, kind home. Yeah. And so that can be quite confronting to experience those things and to be challenged, both physically, verbally, and mentally. So I think that having that depth of character is a really good selling point of yourself, for this sort of role, for the paramedic role, because we see these. I don't watch the ambulance shows, but I imagine TV shows, and they dramatise it really well to make it look like every job's something significant and every moment is life-threatening and all these sorts of things. But that ain't the way that your normal day goes. And you don't just save a life by being a proceduralist, having a drug that you give, or a piece of equipment that saves a life. Sometimes you save a life by being present to someone, hearing their story, being kind to them, and getting them to the right resources and support networks if you can. That's still saving a life.
Yep.
You just don't see it the same way that a drug might work, I suppose, was instantaneously. So yeah,
that's really interesting. From what I'm hearing, you're saying that really to develop your character, which is A1, the quality that is what determines a great paramedic. But it's really just exposure to people in the community, different walks of life.
Yes.
Building empathy.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can do that in many, many ways.
Yes. I'm not involved in the selection process of recruitment of people. What I know second or third hand is that for quite a while, organisations were doing quite a psychological profile on people that wanted to become a paramedic. And so they really weren't looking at whether you got 7s at university like as a high distinction. They were really looking at whether you were a good person, how you related to other people. It's like a Big Brother set. Watching the way you engaged with other people and spoke with them. And they were I suppose their flags were if you were at either extreme of human behaviour. So you were the absolute, extrovert, maybe borderline psychotic or narcissistic, and it was all about beating your own chest and showing everyone how awesome you were. Or you were the extreme introvert, which was you found it very hard to talk to people, lived inside your shell and didn't say much. So, Goldilocks for ambulance is that person that's able to speak to people. You can connect with people at the high income, area of life where you are there of service to them. You connect with people who are in darkness, whose lives has totally disconnected them from everyone, but you relate to them as a human being. And so you've got to have that, skill set, that armament to be able to relate to all sorts of people in all sorts of situations. And no matter which way it goes, you'll have something or some way to go to help them with that.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's really good. I love that insight, Ricky.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Mate, you alluded to a specific moment in your career, or two actually, in our pre-interview questions. Are they kind of moments that you now, we were talking about, your off-duty breach delivery and also resuscitation. Can you tell us a story of those and how those impacted you, if that's okay?
Yeah, no, of course. So the breech delivery case and subsequent resuscitation of twin number 2 was for we live quite remotely. Not so remotely. It's the Gold Coast hinterland, so it's about half an hour, 40 minutes from town. So it's not as remote as Longreach or something like that, but far enough away that help takes a little while to get there. And our neighbour at the time had 5 children. They had wanted to have a girl. They had 5 boys and wanted to have a girl, so she became pregnant again, and somehow was able to encourage a home birth with a midwife at a remote location with twins, where even then the midwife would be another 40 minutes away. So and multi-para, multi-gravid. So there's a potential there for that pregnancy or delivery to go quite quickly. So the couple of flags there that I would suspect a wise midwife would stay right away from it because of all the challenges that it might bring. Nevertheless, midnight rolls along. My wife and I are at home, get a phone call from her partner to say that she's in labour. So we took off up the road to their place. Baby number 1 was delivered, so quite normal cephalic delivery, which was quite great.
Just catching, right? Really?
Got my wife to ring up to organise an ambulance to be coming to us, aware that she was having twins. And baby number 1 was another boy. So now they've got 6 boys.
Oh, wow.
Baby number 2, who ended up being breech, was a girl. And both my wife and I would speak through the pressure that we felt, in those moments. Because we live in a small community, people know us. When we first moved there, because ambulance services were quite far away, we would often get a phone call to come around or pop around and help out where we could.
Yeah.
And the pressure of the situation, which was the delayed birth because of the breech delivery, all that was going through my mind was the potential for, loss of oxygen, brain damage, potential death, those sorts of things. And so did a maneuver called a love sets maneuver, where the baby is rotated to be able to deliver the anterior shoulder first, otherwise it won't deliver. Okay. That worked really, really well. But baby number 2 came out quite flat, so a very low APGAR score, essentially apneic, and required sort of mouth-to-mouth and some CPR done prior to the ambulance getting there. My wife tells the story of the ambulance officer arriving, who's a friend of ours, who's a neighbour type thing, and he tells the story of when he first got the phone call about what was going on. He was shitting himself. And so he was quite happy to walk in and see babies had been delivered and know that the situation had gone well, So a lot of pressure on people. And my wife, God love her, apart from calling the ambulance, it was also a time when Careflight used to work up in our area quite often. And so they arranged for an obstetrician to come along. Yep. And a nurse. And so they were picked up from the hospital, brought up to our local area, and facilitated the transport of mum and baby back to care, back at the Gold Coast Hospital. So I can just strongly remember, Kim and I getting home after this experience and, just in the moment after it's all done, just in darkness, just crying our eyes out, just overwhelmed by what we'd been involved with. And also not knowing how things would turn out. Because, as I was speaking to a student the other day, paramedics by their very nature are really good, like any emergency service person, of hiding what's going on. Yep. So we have this affront of being in control. It's all good. We've done this before. We mirror or try to mirror calm, That's both a strength. So for the people in our care who are watching our care, they go, oh, this is awesome, they're amazing, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't see what's going inside the head of that person. And so it's actually kryptonite as well. So it's a strength to have this ability to be able to take on anxiety-producing, stressful moments, be very calm in those situations. Yeah. But under the guise of what's going on in your head, you're probably pooping yourself as to what's happening, but you elude a sense of confidence for people to try and bring things down a little bit, So it's definitely kryptonite, because what it means is that, two things. As a paramedic, you can feel like bad things only happen to other people, not to us. And number 2 is, because you spend so much time being strong, it can disconnect you from when you are in trouble, when you do get in the abyss. Because I can recall a case where 2 firemen died. So we went to a business that was on fire. We arrived with the fire brigade. This is quite a long time ago, so back in around 1990, 91. Arrived with the fire service. It was a structural fire that involved a motorcycle business. Because motorbikes in the it was an old Queenslander house that they were running the business from. Wow. So it had 80 motorbikes inside the business, all next to each other, all chained up. It was downstairs was the workshop, so full of oils and fuels and all sorts of things. So you can imagine that the black smoke that was generated by this fire was terrible. It was nighttime, so visibility was down. So we sat there, as we do with fire standbys, watching to see what was happening and make sure that if anyone got hurt, that we were there for that. And over that probably about 45-minute period, you could see the level of the fire officers become elevated. And so they realised at some point that two of their friends or two of their colleagues were missing. And so, from an emergency service point of view, we're used to seeing chaos and anxiety and stress in the people who we go to help. We're not used to seeing it in the people who are there to deliver help. And so watching that level of anxiety and fear build, for the fire officers was quite terrible. So my partner and I were down there to witness that. And then they eventually found them, both in cardiac arrest or possibly deceased. Helped them to get them out of the building. They weren't too far inside the building. But once again, it's that difficult area, Ben, where you're used to things happening to other people, not to us. And so the death of an emergency service worker or potential harm to them makes paramedics, fire officers, and police officers connect with the delusion that we're not in control and that nothing will ever happen to us. And like Superman with the undies on the outside, we're kind of like bulletproof, but that's not the case. And so those sorts of moments really reinforce how if you're not connected to that vulnerability that we all are, that we could all walk out of here today and be in trouble, you can pretend that you're okay. And that's diabolical from a psychological point of view, which is you're not Superman or Superwoman. Stuff will happen and you'll have to deal with it or not deal with it and then be alone, which is trouble, which is where the disconnect is a problem.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about that now, and your role as a peer support officer, which I understand you've had for 20 odd years.
Yeah.
And this is really quite a significant topic for people thinking of going into this career.
Yes.
On the pathway. What does that role look like for you? And is this as a program that's run by the service?
Yeah.
And I also want to talk a little bit about is there any stigma, or is that stigma breaking between people, on the force that we're in control, we don't break.
Yes.
And it strikes me that there may be somewhat of a hesitation to say, I need support, I need help. And how's that changed throughout the years that you've been operating in this role?
Well, it's amazing because, if you can imagine, back in the older days when you had the tradespeople join the service, men were men. Men did all the doing jobs, so you wouldn't have found women, within the ambulance service, police force, or fire service. There were no girls when I first started. And so it was very blokey. It was very, if you can't handle the fire, get out of the kitchen. And there were very few options to be able to put your head out to say that I'm having a difficult time. You can imagine, Ben, that there are psychological services and support provided internationally, with emergency service organisations. And that trickled into our service through one of the senior ex-QATB administrative guys that brought that into the service. We were fortunate because our commissioner at the time was a doctor. He was in charge of previously Ipswich Emergency Department. So he's very sensitive to those sorts of issues and helped bring it into the service, which was amazing. What the service was surprised by, so they created a budget to provide this service. I believe that in the first year, the demand was like 3 times what they had expected, And what really hasn't changed in that time was that we think that, the psychological or potential psychological traumas and difficulties that people experience through this job are the things that they see, smell and do on a daily basis. So the potential to deal with death, challenge, confrontation, those things are very real, and to be with people on the worst day of their lives, it is truly there. But what hasn't changed is the demand for psychological support from those services actually relates to the organisational trauma. And so, I remember, coming to the ambulance service thinking, it's a caring organisation. They're going to be lovely people. They want to help people, all that sort of nice, fluffy stuff. And you know what? People come from all sorts of different backgrounds, do it for all sorts of different reasons. So fluffy it wasn't. And you'll meet some people who are amazing and some people who are awful. And it doesn't mean that they can't be good ambulance officers or paramedics. It's just that there are different, people that bring different things to the table. In some ways, all want to help. But, organisational trauma or post-traumatic injury can come from, something that you see as part of the job. But if your leader or supervisor or the organisation doesn't support you the way you were expecting it to be supported, that causes its own trauma. So you've already seen something, done something that was pretty yucky. If you're on the receiving end of something bad afterwards, if, for instance, the organisation treats mistakes or problems as being personal, so it's a blaming organisation that says the reason why they went wrong is because you're bad, it's not because of any other systemic issue, that's the trauma that people can experience at times. And, that's not a part of just the Queensland Ambulance Service, that's part of any organisation. You'll meet ex-police officers or fire officers or nurses or doctors that, may have been on the receiving end of something, and how they were treated will depend on how they do after that event, Yeah. Which is, I'm reading a current book called Human Factors in Paramedicine. It involves ergonomics as well. And, they're very much the ideology that when things go wrong is to look at a system thing, not just an individual as to what's happened. The slices of the Swiss cheese may have all lined up for whatever reason. And that's where probably the gold is. So, yeah.
So system first.
It's definitely system first. It's when something goes wrong, it's the opportunity to say, well, what is going on? Where does everything lie? What do we need to be looking at? And you can look at that from a NAPLAN perspective, even with teaching, Ben, which is, NAPLAN, my darling wife's a teacher. NAPLAN was designed so that a teacher would know where the kids fit. It wasn't designed as being able to assess teachers or assess schools or whatever else. It was a tool for teachers to be able to know where kids are and what needs to change to be able to help teach and educate. But it becomes politicised and becomes a tool to be able to use to say good or bad. In the same way, organisations can create tools that they use to try and capture what's going on, and rather than seeing it as, well, this is where we need to spend our energy on our education or training with our people, they can see it as a tool to capture people, for doing the wrong thing or being bad with the way they might do their paperwork or something, But I suppose it gets us back to that whole peer support network thing, which was originally they thought it was about things you see. And so there was at the start, it was all about having these, CISD, bringing everyone into a room after a bad thing happened. Everyone has a piece of the puzzle. We all sit around and hold hands and share what's going on, which is great if you like that sort of thing. If you don't like it, it was very bad for people to re-experience the trauma of going through a job. And it's come full circle to being, well, not full circle. It's gone down that path now of that model was okay at the start, but now we deal with individuals. And what's lovely is that, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the chippy, if you can't handle a fire, get out of the kitchen thing, that's really morphed into something which is modern age. So, when I speak to my ambulance psychologist friends and counsellors, they would say that the new age paramedic actually comes and pays them a visit, not when they're broken, but just for like a welfare check, just to sort of say, how do you think I'm travelling? This is what's going on for me. What do you think? As opposed to, I'm over in the corner straight at the start of the session sucking my thumb and, wanting to hurt myself. And so that's a lovely transition. So it's about well-being, right? Peer support role, fabulous role, did it for a long time. It was a support and broker role, which means that you try and have a diverse range of ambulance officers or paramedics that did it, because Ben might like Ricky, but Jose doesn't like Ricky, so who else can you go and see if he's having some challenges? The beauty of it is that in coming to see another paramedic or communications officer or, say, for instance, a leader, that they already know. There's a lot of unspoken stuff that we both know what's going on. So that's a beautiful thing. But the kicker is that it's a support and broker situation. So I'm here to acknowledge, understand, listen to what you're experiencing and going through. But my job is to actually broker you off to a counsellor, because we're not the psychological professionals. We can't fix things and do things like that. They're the people that they need to be in touch with. So it's a skill that a peer support officer has to learn, which is to understand that support broker, you're not everything for everybody. And sometimes, you're not in a good place to be able to listen to other people's experiences, because, my experience of that 20-year role was that I had some breaks amongst that 20-odd years, because you're double dipping. And so because I have my own experiences with things I see, and then I listen to your story about what you've just seen and done, I can actually imagine what that's like to have gone to that job. And so I'm not just absorbing my own working week stuff. On my days off, I'm listening to other stories about what's going on with other people's stuff, and it's loading you up. So your bucket can become quite full, caring for people. So as part of that role, you would generally once a month meet with a counsellor, either as a group or individually, just to offload whatever's going on, or just to make sure you're okay. Yeah, because we're not always very good at knowing where we are in the forest. Yeah.
But it sounds like the service as a whole in the industry is sort of maturing in that way, that, as you said, when you were first involved, it was kind of...
Very much so. Like, I think we'll give us some experience. Like, I've probably got around 800 hours of sick leave up my sleeve after having a long career. So, theoretically, I could have about 3 months off and still be paid during that time, Now, back when I first started, if I had shown that I was vulnerable or weak or a job affected me, other people back then might have thought, oh, maybe you shouldn't be doing the job, or maybe you should leave or do something else. It's not hard enough for the job, etc. When I think about some recent cases where, I did a traumatic arrest of an 80-year-old who had accidentally gone through his arm with an angle grinder and had, bled out in front of his wife. And my partner responded to that. There was a lot going on at the scene, both with family members, with bystanders that were there, as well as trying to facilitate the resuscitation. And so after that job, I was baked. I was cooked. Like, my mind, cognitively, my bandwidth had narrowed to the point where I just spent, the hour doing the job. I then spent some time having to, report write the event, so that, because it's going to go to the coroner. So there are medical legal issues with what happens as well. Now, it was halfway through my shift. I knew that being baked halfway through your shift is not a good thing.
Right.
And I'm lucky enough to have that sick leave up my sleeve, and the people that supervise or lead me, when I rang them up to say, look, this is where I'm at, I need to just check out. I need to go home after this to get my head right, because if I don't, I might make a drug error or calculation wrong. Yeah. I might go from the, traumatic, cardiac arrest to someone that, I don't know, has a paper cut to their finger that expects me to turn up, with bells and whistles on and happy and smiley and being sorry that we've taken an hour or so to get there. And, they want first-rate service too. Yeah. But they wouldn't have a clue what I've been to prior to that. Now, I could turn up and not be at my best, be a little bit flat, not look really good on my face. Like, I'm pretty bad at having a bit of a poker face. So a little bit pissed off or cheesed off at what I'm trying to process and stuff like that. And I might say something or do something that gets me, a complaint or in trouble and upset someone. So it's much better for me to tap out than to get it wrong, in the afternoon, because that could have, life-saving or life, questioning issues for your patients, afterwards, or your peers. So if that all goes bad. So knowing yourself is probably a good thing. Yeah.
So, Ricky, how does somebody know if they're suited to the role of a paramedic?
That's a really good question, because, you only know through doing, right? And so you can have this picture in your head and watch some shows on telly that say this is what the job is. But until you feel the real world experience of what it's like, you won't know. And so some of our university, clinical placement students, Ben, most of them come to us after having done a whole year of ambulance, their degree. So they don't get to see what happens on a daily basis until after having done their course for a year. Now, most paramedics would say, gee, it'd be great if early on that degree they could get a ride-along to sort of see whether it's for them or not, so they don't waste a whole year doing something. Having said that, though, nothing's a waste. So even if you've done a year of paramedicine and realise it's not for you, it still takes you somewhere. It's still, wherever it might be. But there will be some people that walk away after their first clinical placement going, nah, I can't do this. Like my wife, who's a teacher, said that, with her cohort of primary school teachers, there are about 350 that started the cohort. After their first placement at a school, they lost about 90 of them. 90 people walked away going, nah, I'm not going to spend all this time becoming a teacher, because it's really hard work and it really is taxing, and I don't have the skill. You know what I mean? Like, so you reflect on that. So, yeah.
So, Ricky, I want to talk about now your greatest thrill about doing what you do, perhaps why you do what you do, and the fulfillment, the reward that you get out of it. Now, I did ask this already before our interview, and I just want to allude to or make reference to your answer, and we'll talk about that. Now, you said primarily it's easing people's pain and suffering, and the quote that you gave, or the mantra that you gave, was that no one dies in pain, no one dies afraid, and no one dies alone. That's deep stuff, but really it's this whole subject of death that you really have to confront and know, and as a paramedic, and it's quite a responsibility, a privilege, but a responsibility to sometimes be there in somebody's final moments. Can you talk a bit about how you go about that?
I think you asked before about the qualities of being a paramedic. What sort of skills or characteristics suit you? If you don't like people, this is not the job for you. If you find yourself, being judgmental or self-righteous about people's choices and paths in life, it'll get you into trouble every time. So I try to have a very non-judgmental manner about me to try to understand people's journey. It's very hard in this time-critical, at times, job that we do. But, an example of that would be, my brother, he's like a professor of psychology at ANU, so one of Australia's top universities. Now when he went through a divorce, a separation and family breakdown and divorce, he ended up sleeping in his car for like 12 months, so he was homeless, Now, if you were to speak with him during that dark, challenging time, where there was no light, for him to be able to see which way's out, there's no way you predict where he is, 30 odd years since then, But what was important was as alone and as frightened and as disconnected as he was was to have people around him that kept him connected, and that's one of the problems of modern day life for us, especially on the Gold Coast, which is quite a transient place, which is, you're seeing a lot of family breakdown. You're seeing people disconnected, so they have no support network, no one, which is why police and ambulance tend to be the go-to people for everything. And you sort of break down, whether it's small or large, it's our terrain. But, in response to, the mantra, Ben, I mean, it's about, acknowledging that, we're all just kind of trying to bring each other home. All of us will have a moment in our lives when something bad happens, and we hope that someone will be around us to be able to ease our being afraid, our being so scared, It's what it is to be human. We're a social species, we hope to be around each other. And through family breakdowns and dysfunction, sometimes everyone in their lives has walked away. So I guess the mantra centers on the issue that no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, my job's to be here for you and to make sure you're not disconnected. Now whether that involves resuscitation, or whether that involves you thinking about making your pain stop because you're ready to leave the world, because the pain's too much. My job's to make sure that there is light, and that, despite how hard this might be, no one's walking away, or we're here, and whatever it takes, we'll do whatever it takes. Often for paramedics, we don't spend a lot of time with people who, die in front of us that we're communicating with one moment, and that ask the question, will I live or die, or what's going to happen to me? It's very rare to experience in that. So a lot of the work we do is to be with bystanders, family members, friends who are going through that chaotic moment, to make sure that they know that everything possible that can be done is being done. And we're treating their loved person as if they're one of ours as well. That nothing's flippant about it. We're engaged in this. So I think with experience, it's not something that I'm sure that they try and teach it with medicine or with paramedicine at university now. But you can't know what it's going to be like until you're actually speaking with someone or working through that, and I guess it's understanding that, there are no right answers. Like sometimes when people, tell me why they're thinking about killing themselves, or why, they're afraid, sometimes the right response is, well, life is fucked. Like really, if I was going through what you would, I actually understand where you're at. But my job is to try and find some solutions to this sort of stuff, in relation to self-harm and those sorts of things. As far as grief and loss, it's to be a conduit to make sure that people know that we're here, we're the foundation. So, when their loved one dies at home or in difficult circumstances, we'll be doing all of the hard things. There's nothing they need to do, say, or act on. We'll look after all that. We've got this. We need to free up to be able to help you with those next few decisions or phone calls, and so more than happy to make phone calls for people, because sometimes, when someone dies and, you're making that phone call to a brother or sister, as the messenger, that can leave a bit of a stain for people. So it's a lot better sometimes if it comes from a third person or a second person that's not family to break bloody shock and news to people, and everyone will react differently. It's, when I left the Navy, the superannuation insurance guy said to the group, okay, I'm going to just dismiss a myth here, okay? It's not if you die, it's when you die. So no one's getting out of here alive. But as human beings, we're constantly never thinking about that. We're hoping it never happens, but we all kind of know it will.
Yeah.
So no one's really prepared for that moment, So it's tough. And, my experience would say that it doesn't matter whether it's sudden or whether it's, a 99 or 102-year-old, great-grandmother. Grief is grief. Even if you know it's coming, it's going to be upsetting. And hard.
It's funny, isn't it? It's that role that you're in to first of all preserve life.
Yes.
Right, and keep somebody alive, but also be there because when they're losing life, you know, and from what you were saying, it's that making a connection with people, understanding, empathizing with that, not having necessarily the right answers or the Well, it's difficult because people can think that we as human beings, you have control over everything. Well, you don't. You can do your best to fix some situations, but there are certainly some situations you can't fix. But you can make sure that people don't suffer during those moments as best you can, and that they have the support so that they're not experiencing a terrible death. And pain relief is one of those things that will help with that sort of stuff. Something analgesia. Yeah. So, Ricky, what would you say would be one of the best qualities, skills of a great paramedic?
I think just a love for human beings, Ben. Because you know what? Sometimes we're really hard to love. Like we can't be, saints. We're going to have our flaws and imperfections. Yeah. But to be open to, the lived experience is really hard. Everyone's doing their best to get through it. Yes, some people are making really bad choices in their lives, but no one wants to be making choices that hurt themselves or others. But they are, by their very nature, possibly making those choices. So being okay with trying to do your best to fix whatever you can fix and move through things. I got through 10 years of being in the Navy without a tattoo, which is remarkable because everyone's bloody inked up, Yeah. And both my kids have got tattoos, and they've got quite a few. And much to my wife's and my difficulty when they're going through it. But I am getting a tattoo, and people get quotes, that mean something to them, And hopefully it stays. It's not just a fleeting quote that you get. Yeah. So the one that I have on my right arm, is like just a reminder, which is one day's burden is enough for one day. So whenever I'm lucky enough to have like a 40-minute to 1 hour drive home. So I definitely try and keep the slate clean, put the day to an end, and not spend an hour thinking about what I've just been through, but get myself into a good place so that when I'm home, I'm present for Kim or whoever's there. And the other tattoo is like, it's a biblical quote too, which is, here am I, send me. So it just relates to the fact that it's just a reminder that everyone calls you for their own reason. So even though after 32 years, you think you've seen the worst and the easiest and the simplest and that sort of stuff, everyone calls you for their own crisis, and whilst it might not seem like a crisis, in my scale of crises, it's not the 2 firemen who have died or whatever else. It's their own little crisis. And so to try and have a clean slate when you walk in so there's no baggage that stops you from connecting or being with people, That's a challenge, Ben, but because it's a very diverse world. Yeah. But what a gift to be part of something where people want you to come and help them. That's a real privilege, because, you'll see things and do things and people will invite you into their lives that wouldn't, think twice of you walking down the street in a T-shirt or whatever else. Yeah. But now here they're sharing stuff with you that, is just extraordinary.
And there's that sense, Ricky, too, that when you lighten somebody else's burden or you carry that somehow all your worries and burdens seem to lighten as well.
Look, you know what? I frequently say if you don't walk away from your day, grateful or blessed with your life, if it doesn't involve crisis, domestic violence, drugs, alcohol, all those sorts of things, you're doing okay, you know. So it is a privilege to witness what other people's lives are like, and be able to walk away thinking, "Geez, I've made some good choices, or I'm lucky, or whatever it might be." But also, you know, so you get this one shot, right? And so you want your life to be meaningful, and so you know this is a very meaningful, you know, job. And whether that's paramedic, whether that's nurse, whether it's doctor, whether it's, you know, paramedical college, first aid events, you're making a difference in someone's life, you know. I always thank the cleaners whenever I see them, because they're bloody heroes, you know, and some people think nothing of it, but no, absolutely. You know, what they say, if a doctor wasn't at the hospital, the place would shut down in a couple of hours. If a nurse wasn't at the hospital, it's shut down within an hour. If a cleaner wasn't at the hospital, it's shut down in 25 minutes. So,
oh, that's great.
So, you know, you need people doing all sorts of things, you know. Yeah.
Now, 38 years of marriage.
Yes.
Many, if not all, would say that's a success. If you're still sleeping in the same house and you've got kids.
Yes.
And you've been in the Royal Australian Navy. You've, you know, obviously been many decades in paramedicine. How do you do it? What's your secret?
Marry a saint, I would say.
Marry a
Saint Kim. They look, Kim, you know, any relationship that's gone for a long time isn't a success-only journey. You've had moments where you've annoyed each other, where you might lose faith in someone, or, you know, question who they are, or whatever, you know, by their choices. So Kim, God love her, has been through quite the roller coaster ride with me as a 15-year-old that joined the Navy, that we met each other. We both, you know, love and adore each other. Like, we both, you know, we're lucky because we just had like 5 weeks together at home, you know. Now, some couples approach retirement, you know, and don't survive because they haven't spent much time around each other, and they don't really like each other that much. So retirement might make them split up. Yeah. Kim and I are really looking forward to just having every day with each other, because we get along really well. We complement each other. We're both understanding and forgiving, and we're both looking in the same direction, you know. So we are very blessed. We're very much looking forward to hopefully having some time together. You know, we have a wonderful family. So the kids are great, grandkids, that sort of stuff. You know, we're just incredibly lucky. Kim is a very understanding and forgiving person too. So, you know, like the peer support work, for instance, that took me away from my family. So I'm already doing work, and then someone rings to say they're not travelling well. Oh, Kim, is it okay if I go catch up with, you know, so-and-so? Kim's like, yeah, go and catch up with them. You know, they need you, stuff like that. So both Kim and the kids have both been understanding it, releasing me to help other people. Yeah. But, you know, at some point they should sort of say, well, stop doing that, because we want you at home. We need you. We need the best of Ricky Smyth at home. And at some point I've got to say, you know what, I've done that. I need to move to this. So that's been a good thing too, Ben, which is knowing when to pull the pin on something, and knowing when it's not working, and seeing the signs, you know, that it's not working. Yeah, that's a really important thing. So I think, you know, with ambulance, you know, self-awareness is a really important thing, is to know, you know, it'd be very easy to be ego-driven, you know. Yeah. I'm awesome, you know, do all this sorts of work. But you actually have to be really self-aware of how you fit in the system. We work as a team. You know, the best jobs I've been to is where everyone on the team, or everyone that's there, is working together. There is no ego in the pursuit of helping, you know, a person or a number of people, those sorts of things. Some of the worst jobs I've seen have involved someone that's, you know, ego has arrived, and decisions or things are being said that just are toxic, you know, and it's bad for patient care. It's bad for team morale. It's wicked. You know, there's a great science about being in civil. Okay. And a consultant physician from Scotland, I think, is on a TED talk where he talks about incivility and what it costs. And he said that, if I'm incivil to you at a job, at a case or whatever else, that reduces your ability to think, your cognitive bandwidth by 50%. So your ability to be able to problem solve and work out what's going on and make decisions has just dropped by half. Now, that's dramatic, but here's the other problem is that if someone else is in the room witnessing that, okay, so you've already dropped someone else's problem-solving ability, which is bad. But if someone else is in the room witnessing it, it drops, even though they're not the ones being attacked, their cognitive bandwidth drops by 25%. So all of a sudden, just because someone's being rude, obnoxious, or wanting to be, in charge, your ability to be able to problem solve a situation just dies,
Wow.
So
it's really important to understand that as a leader, isn't it? Or, I mean, anybody, but in a leadership position particularly.
Yes. So incivility can't be tolerated by, by paramedics really. We've moved towards, aviation has become safer because they have checklists and language that helps them to avoid that autocratic, narcissistic, I'm the captain of the aircraft thing. Yeah. And there's a thing called CUS, C-U-S, which is, when someone's doing something that's not okay, it's hierarchical. So you start with saying, hey, I'm concerned. Hey, I'm uncomfortable. Hey, this is a safety issue. Step away from the patient, or whatever it might be, or step away from the controls. But you have to have some language, which is what we're working towards, is getting people better language and skills to be able to, work in teams
and navigate those potential conflicts.
A couple of great books, Peak Performance Under Pressure by Stephen Hearns, who's a consultant helicopter physician. Amazing book. And there's Human Factors in Paramedicine. They all talk about soft skills, hard skills, and how to negotiate good work.
Excellent. Should be able to find those by just
Google
the titles.
Google Peak Performance Under Pressure or Human Factors in Paramedicine. They're my last two reads.
Fantastic.
Being shared with people at the moment.
Yeah. And while we're on advice, is there any other advice that you would give to those starting out on the pathway or considering becoming a paramedic or working in the emergency services?
Yeah, the job itself tends to attract good people. And so people that want to help and care, that's a good starting point, Not to give up, not to, life is going to have lots of obstacles and challenges and that sort of stuff. It's not what happens to you, it's the way you process what happens to you. It's the way you approach it. So as we alluded to before with my friend whose, son now flies fighter jets, you can start off here, but doesn't mean that you won't end up somewhere else if you've got the passion and the commitment and the drive to do it, I think that's probably sums it up really well, mate. Be open to feedback. The best student clinical placements that we have, and we get a lot of students that come through, people that turn up, that want to learn, that are open to feedback, that are passionate, committed, and keen to do a good job. Some of the occasionally bad experiences relate to people that turn up with a lot of ego. They already think their cup's full because they know stuff, and they're not open to feedback, and they're not open to being vulnerable or risky. They want to get it right or show everyone how awesome they are, whereas none of us are that awesome that you can't learn from each other. So, yeah.
Well said. Really well said. Now, Ricky, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you, mate, and to hear your perspective and your journey. It's been really good. Now, as you know, this podcast is brought to you by Australian Paramedical College. The college did put out the news that we were having you in on the show.
Great.
And asked their students whether they had any questions for you. So if you don't mind, these are, let's call them quickfire questions. Okay. Keep them under 20 seconds. Sort of, within reason. So let's go through them. Well, you may have already answered those, but if you could just sum up the answer, that'd be wonderful. So what are your favourite things about being a paramedic?
People I work with, they're fantastic. I love it. My hashtag is I love the people I work with. I work with the best people. and we work as one. So there's my hashtag. Yeah.
Awesome. If you want to follow Ricky on Instagram, just search that hashtag and you'll probably come up.
Yeah, that's right.
What are your least favourite things about being a paramedic?
Conflict with people that I work with, or that may be leaders, but closed-mindedness would be something that I'd least favour. Yeah, is people that aren't open to discussion.
Okay. I'm an older person looking to enter the QAS or emergency services after uni. I'll be about 45, 46, and there's many in this sort of category.
Yeah.
When I finish, will they employ somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you looked at biomed, which is the medical pathway for someone to become a doctor, a lot of the people who do biomed now have done 2 or 3 other degrees, or they've done something within the workforce and they've come to university then. And so absolutely at 45 or 50 or whatever, there's all sorts of people that come and join us. It's a measure of the character, not their age. So yeah, they're always looking for good people, Ben.
Yeah, good one.
Regardless of age. Okay.
Have you gotten used to shift work? And if so, how do you do it? I assume you have. Because
I don't know if that's a 20-second question. Okay, so I'm lucky enough in the last portion of my career to be on a day afternoon roster. So I don't tend to do nights at the moment because it's a transition to retirement thing. Yeah. I did do 6 weeks as a single officer on like the pod as a CCP to cover a vacancy. Nearly killed me. That was about a year ago. And it's really hard. Like the older one gets, the harder it is to do, because generally with ambulance now, from the minute you sign on to the minute you go home, it's busy. And so it's the challenge of being a single responder too, Ben, is that in a car, we'll offload each other, we'll keep each other engaged, we'll keep each other talking throughout the shift. We'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll do all sorts of things to try and get us through that 12 to 14 hours, whatever it takes to get through. When you're by yourself, you're in trouble at 2 a.m, where you're tired, where you're driving around, and there's no one to talk to.
Right. Now, and this is perhaps on a similar subject. How do you keep a good work-life balance?
Yeah, so
when you're raising a family too, particularly.
Yeah. Look, I was quite young with a young family, so in the early days had lots of energy. As I get older, if I do a night shift, I have to sleep the day of the night shift. I sleep the day after the night shift, and I sleep the day after that too. I'm just exhausted, and so age is an important thing. So if you do enter the service at the age of like 45, as you were saying before, or older, shift work's going to be tough. But there are lots of opportunities now to work flexible work arrangements. So it might be a couple of years of shift work and then maybe a flexible work arrangement. Who knows? Sleep, exercise, rest, and have a loving, caring family, I think, Ben, is the issue. Yeah.
Okay. This is a great one, and this is one I'd be keen to hear from you. Very evident from today in our discussion. How do you maintain your positivity and that positive outlook on life after so many years in a challenging career?
Yeah, I wish I had a checklist you could do that, mate. I really do love people. It fills my tank, whether it's helping them, whether it's listening to their stories, whether it's just sharing my life with them. Those are the things that keep me enriched. I read a lot of stuff. So, I suppose, at 15, there was a family breakdown in our family. So, did a lot of counselling and those sorts of things. So, I believe I'm quite in touch with who I am as a human being, and what matters to me. And for me, it's those around me. So that's the source of richness. Yeah, not stuff.
And it strikes me that you've got quite a spiritual component to yourself that kind of gives value to what you do as a family man and as a practitioner as well.
Yeah, no, very much so. So I would consider myself like a lay Buddhist. You know, it's not a religion; it's a way of life. You know, that keeps me connected to the things in my heart. Really, that's important to me. Kim's Catholic, so she can gamble, drink, and just say sorry. And she's amazing. So once again, we both bring something different to the table, and both respect and love each other for that reason.
Beautiful. 2 more. What tips would you have for anyone looking to find work in your industry?
Yeah, I think we started out with the idea that get involved in broad things, disability services, drug and alcohol stuff, vulnerable people, homelessness. Volunteer to work with Orange Sky, who do a lot of the homeless work. Yeah. It'll make you a better person because you become a better listener and understanding that everyone's got hard stuff going on. So I think that's the gist. Yeah. That's
great. And so that sort of work being on your resume, and it's not entirely why you do it, but to demonstrate as well as develop your own character and ways. But it's just a great thing to show, right? That you have had the initiative to do these things.
Well, make you a better person, Ben. Like, anytime you're exposed to someone else's challenges and stuff, you'll have a look at their life, you'll understand that better, and you'll understand yourself better, so it's a good thing. Yeah.
Okay. Now this, possibly you've answered this, but the final question, how to maintain a positive mental well-being as a paramedic?
Yeah, look, there are going to be some dark moments. Some days there are lots of those dark moments. Some days there's not. Paramedics, or we used to call them ambos, we're good storytellers, and so having the chance to work with different people all the time, share each other's lives, learn from each other's stories, and laugh as much as we can. And realise none of us are perfect. Like, we all have our flaws and stuff going on. That leads one to have a better life, I think, mate. It's just being around good people, and our service is full of them. We're so blessed, including the students, by the way. Like, I always want to know their student story. So tell us about you, tell us who's at home, tell us all these things, what have you done, all that sort of stuff. Because they're part of the team, for that 6-week placement or more. Yeah. And often on their departure, I say to them, so the gift of, this mentorship is it's for life. Like, you've always got my number, you've always got my contact. You reach out to me and tell me what's going on. If someone's giving you a hard time, let me know, because I know most of the people in the service. So is my partner. So, we're here now. We're a resource. So, you're not alone. Yeah.
Mate, thank you so much again. I think the quote on your shirt sums it all up, mate. It really does. It's a cracker. In a world where you can be anything, be kind.
Absolutely. Good work. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, mate.
Awesome. Nice to see you.
All the best.